Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. There are two issues involved in this article. One, it is speaking about the media trial. We have discussed about this issue in our last week CNA. We have also discussed how the fourth pillar of the democracy is not responsible when it's addressing the current issues of the country. It is focusing on trivial issues and not focusing on major issues that which has been impacting the country. This has been discussed in our last week CNA. But today's discussion is only on the focus of Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. We will try and understand what are the features of this act, how this act came into prominence, what are the various issues concerning the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. First, we have to understand why this law was introduced. We have the Constitution of India. According to the Constitution of India, we have Article 47 of the Indian Constitution. It speaks about prohibiting the use of drugs by the people except in those which is required for the medicinal purposes. So the Article 47, which happens to be in the directive principles of the state policy, clearly specifies that drugs and its consumption can be prevented by the state except in the medicinal use. This is with respect to India, and India has also signed number of international conventions as well. This includes Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs 1961 as amended by the 1972 protocol, the Conventions on the Psychotropic Substances 1971, the United Nations Convention against illicit traffic in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. Because India has been party to all these international conventions, it becomes very important for India to comply by these rules. So what should India do? Because it is mentioned in the Constitution of India, because India is part of these international conventions, it ideally requires a law. So to bring all this into practice, what we require is one law, and that law happens to be the Narcotic Drugs and the Psychotropic Substances Act. Why? Because the Constitution says so, and we have also have to comply by the international conventions. So we have introduced this law. What is the major objective of this law? The major objective is to deter the drug trafficking. It uses every possible trick and every possible rulebook laws so that to make sure that there is prevention of drug trafficking in India. It has various provisions which includes punishment for production, for manufacturing, sale of this particular drug, possession of the drug, consumption of the drug, use, transport of all the banned drugs. So in case there is a person who is manufacturing it or producing it, such person will be put behind bars. In case he is transporting it, that person will also be put behind bars. In case there are people who are using it, such people will also be put behind bars, is the major law, which is the Narcotic Drugs and the Psychotropic Substances Act. When it comes to the addition or the deletion with respect to what component has to be present in this act, that will be decided by the central government of India. So the central government can add or omit from the list of psychotropic substances with respect to this act as well. Back in the year 2015, the central government added one of the substance called as mefedrone. This was not there until 2015, but the central government realized this has been misused and this has been abused by the youth of India, and as a result this was placed under this particular list. So how does the central government usually do it? They have a bifurcation. So what is this bifurcation? They have something called as the small quantity, they have something called as the commercial quantity, and they also have the intermediate quantity as well. So anything which is more than small quantity, which is less than small commercial quantity, will be called as the intermediate quantity as well. So in this particular analogy, the central government will also impose penological principles on the very person, and punishment will be enforced for the violators. Let us take a simple example. Let's say for example there is a person who is using cocaine. It is a small quantity, let's say it is about 2 grams. It becomes a commercial quantity if it is 100 grams or more. So anything which is more than 2 grams and less than 100 grams will be what is called as the intermediate quantity. So kindly remember, the punishment will be decided as per this analogy of the small quantity as well as the commercial quantity. So what is the punishment according to this act? So in this particular act, kindly remember, the penalties depend on the small quantity or the commercial quantity, and at the same time the law very clearly says that it provides a minimum sentence of 10 years of imprisonment in case there is a person possessing commercial drug in his house or he is possessing it. So in case there is a person who happens to grow a particular drug which is not permitted under this law, such person minimum, if it is commercial quantity, will be penalized with 10 years of imprisonment, and this can also have a fine of about 1 lakh as well. So in case there is a particular drug or it is a particular plant which is not supposed to be used, not supposed to be grown, in case it is done, then there will be 10 years of imprisonment. Let's take another example. Let's say there is a farmer who is growing opium. So he is a licensed person. So the government of India or the government of that state has given license to this farmer, because this farmer has taken the license. Why? Because this can also be used for the medicinal purposes as well. In case there is a person who happens to go to this particular farm and he happens to pick this up, emblazonment happens. That is when there is an imprisonment of 10 to 20 years as well, with a fine ranging from 1 lakh to 2 lakh. So if there is no license, again this person will have an imprisonment of 10 years, and if it is stealing that happens from a particular farm where they have taken a license but this person is a thief, in such a case there will be a penalty of 1 to 2 lakh with an imprisonment of 10 to 20 years as well. We have something called as narco terrorism. What is narco terrorism? Where countries use it as a tool to disturb the peace in that particular region. Let's say for example, Pakistan has been trying to do it in the northwestern frontier, especially in the state of Punjab. This is happening because of narco terrorism. So use of drugs to disturb peace and tranquility within a particular region is what is called as narco terrorism. Back in the year 1985, as this particular law came into picture, after 4 years in 1989, the legislature also came up with another mandate. So what is this mandate? In case there is a person who's caught with commercial quantity and he is penalized and is out, and if this person repeats for the second time, who happens to be repeating periodically, such a person will be put behind bars and he can be susceptible to death penalty as well. So kindly remember, the act also has the maximum punishment of death penalty if the accused has been convicted before as well. So this was basically introduced to make sure that there was no narco terrorism. Also remember, in case there is an accused who is put behind bars under this act, getting the bail will be extremely difficult as well. This also happens to be the criticism of this act and a major concern with respect to this act. Back in the 1978 and the 1980s, we had the Supreme Court of India coming up with a statement. It said that bail is the norm and jail is an exception. In this particular backdrop, why is that this particular act does not allow the accused get the bail is the first important concern. Why? Because it becomes very difficult for these people to get the bail if they are arrested under this act. There is a concept called as mens rea when it comes to the criminal laws. What is this mens rea? This is nothing but guilty mind. Let me explain this with the help of an example. Let's say there is a person who is driving a car. So as he is driving, suddenly he encounters a small child who comes in his way. So what should he do? He has to prevent hitting this child so that he can save this child. So obviously what does he do? He steers his cars onto the footpath, but there is a person who is standing here as well. Unfortunately, he hits this person on this particular platform and this person gets killed in this process. So is he culpable in this particular case? No. Yes, he might have committed a murder. Yes, he might have killed another person, but his intention was not to kill this person. So he was innocent. Why? Because his only intention was to save this child who walked all of a sudden while he was driving on the road. But this happened as an accident as well. So he would be proved as innocent, but there could be a procedure where that will be taken up as well, and this person can also be put up some penalties as well. But ideally, was he guilty of committing a crime? No, because he did not have any intention of committing this act. So the general presumption when it comes to the criminal laws is that all people, whether he's committed an act or he's omitted from committing an act, such people will be treated as innocent until they are proven guilty by the court of law. So who takes the responsibility of it? It is the prosecution. Yes, there is defense as well, but it is the responsibility of the prosecution to prove that this particular person who's committed an act has done it without any guilty conscience. In case it is proved in the court of law, that is when penalty or penological principles will be enforced. But if they are not able to prove it, then what happens? This person is not proved guilty and he is acquitted as well. In this particular case, until this person is proved that he is guilty of this particular crime, he is innocent. But what happens under the Narcotics Act? From the very beginning, this person who is booked under this act is assumed to be guilty. In the ideal circumstances, it is to be proved by the prosecution that this person is guilty, but when it is booked under this law, the person is assumed to be guilty, and it is this person who has to prove that he is not guilty. Ideally, in all other criminal charges, you have the prosecution which has to prove that it is the accused who is guilty, but under the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, it is the accused himself who has to prove that he is not guilty, which means that we are violating some of the standard foundations of the criminal justice system. There is another angle involved as well. What is this? Let's say, for example, I have no idea about the drugs. I have no idea what this drug is all about, but there could be a plot against me by the enemies, or there can also be a possibility where there could be a drug peddler who was caught by the police, but while he is running, he can place this particular drug in another person's house or in another person's bag as well. So what happens? The person who is caught, who has no idea about it, becomes the accused in this particular case, and this accused is also guilty in the very first instance according to this act. I have no idea about this drug. It is a plot of my enemy, or there is a drug peddler who has forced it into my bag or into my house. But if the police or the other prosecuting agencies come and catch hold of me, I am initially not assumed as innocent, but I am assumed as the guilty is the major issue when it comes to this act. This is what is the second major criticism. The third major criticism is with respect to the awarding of death sentence to the drug peddlers. We can take one of the examples of Iran. What happens in Iran? There are a number of people who are caught every single year, and what does Iran do? Iran puts them under the deathbed, and these people are hanged. In case they have been distributing the drugs, Iran is the example where couple of death sentences have taken place and the issue still persists. So what is the issue here? If we are enforcing death sentence and snatching away the life of the person, it is not serving justice. Instead, what we can also come up with is life imprisonment. In fact, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime also does not support death penalty as the final form to this particular issue. We have example of Iran. We have also United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which does not support the idea of death penalty. So why have the death penalty for this issue is another major criticism when it comes to this particular act. So what is that we have to do? So instead of awarding death sentence, what we can do is to give awareness to the people, educate the people not to take the path of drugs. Peddlers have to be caught and not the consumers. Consumers will have to be given education. Consumers will have to be rehabilitated, and all the negative issues with respect to the usage of drug will also have to be told to all the drug peddlers as well. As long as there is supply, that is when consumption will happen. So the main issue is to stop the supply, and what we have to do is to hit those peddlers and not the consumers. Yes, the consumers are also seeking for it for the instant gratification, but only when we are able to stop it at the source end is when we would be able to end this very menace, is some of the arguments put forward by couple of articles. What we also have to understand is when it comes to this implementation of the act, what we have is the Narcotics Control Bureau. The Narcotics Control Bureau is under the supervision and the control of the central minister, which is directly under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So what is this agency? It is the apex drug law enforcement agencies, where it coordinates with all the state governments and it coordinates with the international bodies. And because India is the signatory to all these international bodies, it is this agency which will implement all these international conventions as well as the nation's laws as well. So kindly remember, it is this organization which is responsible for coordination with multiple ministries, state government and central government in regard to drug law enforcement and also in respect of matters relating to drug abuse. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says an agricultural led revival as flawed claim. COVID-19 has upset the growth and its predictions. Most sectors are witnessing a crisis in primary sector, manufacturing sector and service sector. But some are articulating that it would be the agriculture which will help in economic revival. No, says the author of this article. The assumption of revival was based on four important arguments. What are these arguments? Let's try and understand them. The first argument says India's food grain production in 2019 and 20 was 3.7% higher than in 2018 and 19. This, according to the author, is a flawed argument. Why? As per the official data, only 13.5% of the paddy farmers and 16 wheat farmers in India sell their harvest to a procurement agency at an assured minimum support price. So these percentages reveal that it is very less number of farmers who actually give it to the government agency and they also get the minimum support price. But the rest of the farmers actually sell their particular produce only in the open market, which means ideally what we should look at is not the procurement agency numbers, but instead we have to look at the market estimation. So when we look at the market estimation, this, according to the author, has been very less. Why? Because the market arrivals of about 15 crops were way less in 2020 than in 2019. Therefore, according to the author of this article, he says that since if we are comparing the procurement agency's data along with the market agency and we juxtapose this against each other, what we will realize is that farmers have actually suffered more losses than what is being articulated by number of people. In fact, farmers also faced losses during this particular lockdown period as well. Why? Because the mandis were shut. They were not able to understand why the supply chains are not working. There were also issues with respect to the consumption as well. Why? Because the demand also started reducing as well. So according to the author, the first argument immediately falls flat. The second argument says that food inflation in the Q1 of 2020 and 21 was at 9.2%, which was higher than in the previous year due to sustained demand for food. When you look at this particular analogy, this is usually measured in the consumer price index, but this is not representative of the farmers' prices. Why? Because inflation is largely due to disruptions in the supply chain and also because of trade margins. So what we should consider ideally is not the consumer price index, but we have to look at the wholesale price index. And when we are considering the wholesale price index, this particular index has been dropping, and this means that the inflation is not actually increasing for the farmers. And at the same time, when you look at this analogy of retail prices increasing with respect to the consumer price index, it means the farmers are the major sufferers. Why? Because there are other products which they may also have to purchase. For this, they are not able to afford, is the second argument put forward by the author. The third argument says that the area under the Kharif sowing in 2020 and 21 was 14% higher than in 2019 and 20. Higher Kharif sowing was also accompanied by higher tractor and fertilizer sales, which bodes well for the economic recovery. In contrary to this, the article's author says that this is because number of people were not getting good prices for the rabi. That is why they have been shifting to the kharif crops, and this is not only due to that, this is also due to the migration crisis as well. When there was lockdown, what we actually witnessed is large number of people who were in different parts of the country started going back to their native regions as well. Once they started going back to the native regions, it means that these people who were supporting some other sector go back to the agricultural sector, and this means the uncultivated lands which was there in their home state is now getting cultivated, and this also means that kharif productivity is also increasing as well. On one side there is disguised employment, on the other side because of migration, because of people going back to their home states and their home regions and cultivating in the uncultivated lands, there could have been an increase in the kharif sowing, says the author of this article. In fact, he also brings in another argument to substantiate the same. He says data on the monthly employment released by the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy shows that number of persons employed as farmers in June and July 2019 were 11.2 crore and 11.4 crore. But in June and July 2020, these numbers rose to 13 crore and 12.6 crores, which means, as the author suggests, it is all due to the migration crisis. Why? Because people are leaving the city limits and going back to their home places, and they have become disguised farmers, or this has also resulted in they growing the crops in uncultivated lands. The last important factor is that the government's economic package for agriculture as part of 20 lakh Atmanirbhar Bharat package will further position agriculture as the engine of revival. But the author of this article says that only minimal amount was given under this Atmanirbhar Bharat, but most of it already was covered under the budget and in the form of previous schemes and programs. So the real issue is that farmer is not getting much of the benefits from the government, and all the positiveness that farming and agriculture will revive the entire primary sector is a false claim, says the author of this article. Instead, what we require is an alternative which the government will have to take up in the near future. So what are these alternatives? As of now, the government has given a moratorium for the payment of loans as well. So what is this moratorium? It is a temporary suspension. So in case I have to pay loan back with the interest payment to the banks, let's say in the month of September, the government has increased it to the month of January 2021. Instead of moratorium, what the author suggests that the interest amount that has to be paid by the farmer, this has to be reduced, or this has to be completely removed. Why? Because that is when the farmer will get the advantages. So he has to pay only the principal amount to the bank, is the first suggestion given by the author. And at the same time, instead of vague loan based schemes in the animal husbandry, there should be a direct assistance which has to be given to the poultry and the meat sector farmers, is the second recommendation given by the farmer. In case the rural income prevails in a similar fashion, there will be more depression in the economy, and this will continue to haunt the poor section with low prices and low growth in the country, says the author of this article. So what does he suggest? The government has to include more fiscal stimulus in the economy. It has to promote and intervene and add more money in the rural setup. Manrega will have to be enhanced, and more supply from the government side to the people will have to be given. Only when there is money in the hands of the rural people is when there would be demand in the economy, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about mutual logistic support arrangement between India and Japan. India and Japan signed a logistic agreement that will now allow armed forces of both the states to coordinate closely in both services as well as supplies. What do we mean by it? Let's try and understand this in a more elaborate way. The militaries of both the countries will now be able to use the bases and facilities of each other country for repair and replenishment of the services. Let's say, for example, we have the Indian Navy which is traveling in the Indo-Pacific region, that is, let's say in the Pacific region, and all of a sudden the fuel in this particular ship may exhaust. It will get over. So what do? They immediately head to the Japan bases and they start refueling according to this particular agreement. And let's say there is a naval ship which has certain issues, they require certain servicing as well. So what can they do? They immediately can approach Japan's bases and they can also get it repaired as well. And at the same time, the same can happen with Japanese ships as well. In case they have to fuel their ships, in case they have some repair services that has to be taken up, they can visit India and its bases. That is the major advantage with signing of this agreement. India would also be able to use the Japanese base which is set up in Djibouti. What is the advantage here? There is a lot of piracy when it comes to the Somalia coastline. So here we have the Red Sea and you also have the Djibouti as one of the bordering areas with respect to the Red Sea. So because they would also be able to use the Japanese base in Djibouti, they would also be able to control the piracy in the region of Red Sea and close to the Somalia as well. So that becomes another advantage. So with respect to the Japanese, they would be able to use the India's military installation on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So all the military installations, servicing and repair for the Japanese naval ships and other ships can be done when it comes to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands with respect to India and Japan as well. So the agreement signed is mainly aimed at greater maritime cooperation and can also upgrade India and Japan naval exercises as well. Kindly remember, this is not only with respect to these defense equipments and defense issues, but this can also be enhanced when it comes to the peacekeeping operations, humanitarian international relief, and also mutually agreed activities as well. Let's say, for example, there is a tsunami that strikes in a particular region. So the coordination can happen when it comes to the humanitarian assistance according to the mutual logistics support arrangement. What is the significance of this initiative? We have China, which is becoming aggressive in the maritime issues. It is also making sure its naval forces are also reaching Indian Ocean as well. This can be a threat to multiple countries in the Indian Ocean. In order to make sure that the aggression of the China is comparatively controlled and growing concerns over China's military muscle flexing in this region is controlled, what we require is mutual assistance. That assistance is what is being provided by the mutual logistic support arrangement between India and Japan. So basically, this will help in establishing the regional security in both Pacific Ocean as well as in the Indian Ocean. India also has similar agreements with United States of America, France as well as with Australia as well. When it comes to the United States of America, it has signed the Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement with the United States of America. So basically, India would be helping United States of America in refueling facilities and it can also access American bases in Djibouti, Diego Garcia as well as Subic Bay as well. A similar agreement was also signed with France in the year 2018 and Indian Navy would now be able to access the southwestern part of the Indian Ocean region where France has its presence in the Reunion Island. And when it comes to Australia, we already have a mutual logistics support agreement which will help the Indian Navy to actually enter the southern part of Indian Ocean as well. These are some of the advantages with respect to Japan as well as with other countries. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements with respect to the National School of Drama. It is an autonomous organization under the Ministry of Culture. Bharat Rang Mahotsav is the annual theatre festival organized by the National School of Drama. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, it is an autonomous organization under Ministry of Culture and Rang Mahotsav is the annual theatre festival organized by the National School of Drama. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Deputy Chairman of Rajya Sabha, which of the following statements is or correct? Deputy Chairman's salary is charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India. He is removed by a resolution passed by an absolute majority. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because this is not the absolute majority, but instead it is the effective majority. What is the difference here? Absolute majority means the 50% of the total membership and effective majority means 50% of the then members of the Rajya Sabha. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, the deputy chairman is elected by the Rajya Sabha itself from amongst its members And when it comes to the joint sitting, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha presides over the joint sitting of the two houses and the Deputy Speaker in his absence. If the Deputy Speaker is also absent from a joint sitting, it is the Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha and not the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Kindly remember this key important fact. Now let's look into the next practice question. Punapra Vayalar agitation took place in the state of, is it Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala or Karnataka? The answer to this is Kerala. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, this Punapra Valayar agitation was a communist uprising in the princely state of Travancore against the then Maharaja of Travancore and his Diwan Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer. It started in a place called as Punapra and ended in a place called as Vayalar. So kindly remember this fact. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. Sharavati LTM Wildlife Sanctuary is a protected wildlife sanctuary in the state of Karnataka. The sanctuary is known for conservation of lion-tailed macaw. It is classified as endangered by IUCN. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, the lion-tailed macaw is endemic to the rainforest of Western Ghats and spreads over the three states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Kerala, and its IUCN status is endangered. So kindly remember these facts. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following winds are correctly matched? Khamsin, Korean Peninsula, Santa Ana winds, Southern California, Mistral, France, Harmattan, Central Asia. The answer to this is 2 and 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, Khamsin is from North Africa and Harmattan is from West Africa. This could be a very important question for your preliminary examination. But also remember, why is that there is the presence of California wildfires, and this happens every year annually. We have to look at all the major concerns when it comes to the California fire. There are 4 major concerns and issues when it comes to the California fire. One is the climate in California, the other is the issue of climate change, and the third is the issue of local winds, and the fourth is the issue of people. The first issue is speaking about climate of California. What happens when you look at the climate of California? What usually happens is you have the winter season which gets most of its precipitation, and when it comes to the summer, what we have is the dry conditions. So because there are dry conditions, there could be a possibility of fire. Why? Because there is very less precipitation when it comes to this region. So the vegetation will also kindle the fire in this very region. The second reason why the fires start catching up in California is also because of irresponsibility of the people. We have some of the natural causes that can cause fire. This includes lightning as well, but in most of the cases it is because of the human presence. Either it is because of smoking or because of the activities of the people, or there could also be a presence of the wildland urban interface. What is this wildland urban interface? It is all those areas where the houses are in and around the wildland vegetation. So it is this area where these particular forests can catch fire. So the minute people start entering into these forest areas where there is already a pre-existing condition that it can catch fire, because of irresponsible act of the people, such areas will catch fire. So all the forest areas which are completely dried up, which has the possibility of catching the fire, if people enter that particular area, they start constructing the houses, they start living in that particular area, such places usually catch fire, is the second important factor. The third is the presence of the local wind called as the Santa Ana wind. What happens? You have the high pressure that is built up in this particular area of Great Basin, and what is happening here is the presence of low pressure in the Pacific Ocean. So as these winds move from this part to this part, it takes away all the moisture that is present in the plants. Since it takes away all the moisture, it again becomes very dry in these particular regions of Southern California, and as a result, this can also catch fire as well. The last important factor is with respect to the climate change. So what happens? Because of the climate change, California is seeing warmer like conditions, and because there are warmer, this is also exacerbated exacerbating the California fires. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. But also remember, from the preliminary point of view, we have the California Sierra National Forest, which is in California, and we also have the Plumas National Forest as well, which is in the northeast of San Francisco. So kindly remember these facts. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following specific stages of demographic transition associated with economic development: low birth rate with low death rate, low birth rate with high death rate, high birth rate with low death rate. Select the correct code of the above stages using the codes given below. The answer to this is 231. So we have high birth rate with high death rate, high birth rate with low death rate, and finally low birth rate with low death rate. This is basically speaking about the demographic transition and the population. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So the Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping introduced the one-child policy in 1979 to curb China's rapidly growing population. And now, because the Chinese have introduced such a policy of one child policy, there would be issues with respect to China in the near future, and that is to do with its demographic dividend. So the aging population will have a multi-dimensional impact. What is it? China will need huge expenditures on health, social welfare and pensions. Its savings rate will start declining. A fall in the number of young people will lead to a decline in manufacturing, export, and also lower revenues for the government as well. And another important factor is also when it comes to the soldiers as well. Now they have largest army in the world, and in the near future, with less and less number of people, there could be an issue with respect to border safeguards as well. Also remember, with respect to the aggression shown by the Chinese, there could be a possibility when the population starts declining, when there are older people in China, there could be some other country which could also give back to China, is what this article all about. Now let's look into the mains practice question. The primary legislation for dealing with drugs, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, needs a revisit as it has failed to meet its objective of deterrence. Discuss. Contrary to the popular opinion of agriculture-led revival in the Indian economy, the agricultural sector is under the dark cloud of disguised employment and limited institutional support, pushing the economy further into vicious cycle of poor demand, low prices and low growth substantiate. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.